The 1950s looked glamorous, shiny chrome, big fins, powerful engines, but behind the beauty, the roads were deadly. Cars were fast, heavy, and had almost no safety at all. No seat belts, no crumple zones, no mercy in a crash. A single accident could turn these machines into death traps. Here are the 10 worst cars of the 1950s that killed many and proved looks can be deadly. The Chevrolet Bel Air, produced from 1955 to 1957, wasn't just a car. It was a cultural icon that embodied the glittering optimism of post-war America. With its gleaming chrome trim, sweeping two-tone paint schemes, and clean, confident lines, it symbolized prosperity, freedom, and the rise of the open road. In movies, advertisements, and suburban driveways, the Bel Air stood for everything bright and beautiful about the 1950s American dream. Teenagers fell in love with it, families cherished it, and hot rodders saw it as the perfect canvas for performance upgrades. But beneath that pastel perfection and toothy chrome grille was a brutal truth. The Bel Air was as dangerous as it was beautiful, a rolling reminder of a time before safety engineering was even a consideration. Mechanically, the Bel Air represented a significant leap for Chevrolet at the time. It offered powerful V8 engines, including the newly introduced small block 265 cubic inch unit, which turned this family cruiser into a lively, eager machine on the highway. Paired with a lightweight body, it gave the car impressive acceleration for its era, making it a favorite among early street racers and drag enthusiasts. But with great power came great risk. The Bel Air's handling was primitive by modern standards. Vague steering, drum brakes prone to fade, and a suspension system tuned more for soft cruising than for emergency maneuvers. At higher speeds, the car could feel light and unpredictable, and stopping distances were alarmingly long. The real danger, however, lay in its structural design. The 1950s were a time when car safety simply wasn't a priority. The Bel Air's rigid ladder-frame chassis and thin steel body provided almost no controlled deformation in a collision. Modern cars are designed to crumple, absorbing impact energy to protect the occupants. The Bel Air, by contrast, transmitted that force directly to the people inside. The steering column was a solid spear pointing straight at the driver's chest, and the dashboard was made of hard-painted steel with sharp edges and decorative chrome trim. Beautiful to look at, lethal in an accident. There were no seat belts as standard, no airbags, no collapsible steering columns, and no padded interiors. A front-end collision at 30 miles per hour could be catastrophic, even fatal for those inside. Crash tests and modern reconstructions of accidents involving these cars paint a chilling picture. In head-on collisions with modern vehicles, the Bel Air fares miserably. While the body may appear intact, the passengers absorb almost all the impact energy. Drivers could be thrown forward into that hard dashboard or steering wheel, or ejected entirely through the thin windshield. It was an era when speed and beauty came first, and safety was an afterthought if it was thought of at all. This was part of the reason why, in later decades, the development of safety standards changed the entire automotive industry. The interior of the Bel Air, while stunning, also reflected these dangerous priorities. Chrome trim was everywhere, on the steering wheel, the dash, the knobs, and the doors. What made it dazzling in a showroom made it a hazard in a crash. Even the bench seats, comfortable and soft, offered no lateral support, meaning that in a sharp turn or impact, passengers could be thrown around like rag dolls. At the time, however, people weren't thinking about these dangers. Driving was still new and exciting, and the idea of crash safety barely existed in public consciousness. Most drivers believed good driving skills were enough to keep them safe. Yet despite its dangers, the Bel Air's legacy endures because of its powerful cultural impact. It became one of the most beloved and instantly recognizable cars in American history. Its tail fins, chrome accents, and rocket-inspired design captured the space-age optimism of a booming nation. For many, owning a Bel Air was a symbol of having made it in the new suburban America. Hot rod builders in the 1960s and 1970s turned them into quarter-mile monsters, and today collectors meticulously restore them as symbols of an era when cars were rolling pieces of art. The Bel Air is now celebrated at car shows, often with polished chrome gleaming brighter than ever, a nostalgic reminder of how far automotive design has come. But for all its beauty, the Bel Air remains a cautionary monument to a time before seat belts, crumple zones, or even padded dashboards. It was a machine of its era, an era of bold design and technological leaps, but also one of ignorance about the physics of collisions. When people talk about the good old days, they often forget how unforgiving those cars really were in real-world crashes. The Chevrolet Bel Air's enduring fame rests not just on its looks, but on the cultural story it tells, how America fell in love with the automobile and how style and speed once mattered more than survival. It is both a celebration of the golden age of automotive design and a stark reminder of how dangerous that golden age could be. It dazzled millions with its beauty and scared none with its risks. Today, it stands as a beloved relic, a symbol of the 1950s dream and a silent witness to the brutal realities of mid-century motoring. The Citroën DS was one of the most breathtakingly radical cars ever built, and when it first appeared in 1955, it was as if something from another planet had landed on the Paris Motor Show floor. People were used to boxy, upright cars with solid axles and crude brakes, and suddenly here was this low, sleek machine with smooth, almost organic lines, an otherworldly silhouette, and a stance that seemed to float above the ground. Its name, DS, pronounced déesse in French, meaning goddess, was perfectly chosen. For 2 decades, it would mesmerize drivers and redefine what a car could look and feel like. But beneath its smooth surface and extraordinary engineering lay something far less divine. The DS, especially in its early years, was also a deeply fragile and sometimes terrifyingly unsafe machine. The car's biggest claim to fame was its revolutionary hydro-pneumatic suspension system, a marvel of French engineering that gave it an almost supernatural ride. Instead of traditional steel springs, the DS used a complex network of high-pressure hydraulic spheres and pumps filled with fluid and nitrogen gas. This allowed the car to self-level, adjust its ride height, and glide over cobblestones and potholes like a magic carpet. It also powered the steering, brakes, and even the gear shift in some versions. It was advanced far beyond anything on American or European roads at the time, and it made the DS a sensation. But there was a price. This system was complicated, delicate, and, especially in the late 1950s and early 1960s, prone to catastrophic failure. A leak in the hydraulic lines could cause the suspension to collapse suddenly, leaving the car sitting flat on its belly in the middle of the road. Even more dangerously, a loss of hydraulic pressure also meant a sudden loss of steering assist and braking, a terrifying scenario at highway speeds. The DS's body construction was equally unusual. It used a lightweight steel frame with a fiberglass roof, which gave the car its low center of gravity and allowed for its graceful curves. But this roof, while elegant and light, offered virtually no structural protection in a rollover. Unlike modern unibody cars with reinforced safety cages, the DS relied on its frame and body panels, and the thin fiberglass top contributed almost nothing to crash resistance. If the car rolled, the roof could shatter or even peel away, leaving passengers dangerously exposed. In an era when seatbelts were rare and side impact protection non-existent, this turned a graceful icon into a potential death trap in serious accidents. Even the famous single-spoke steering wheel, a design flourish intended to make the interior look airy and futuristic, came with unintended dangers. Unlike more robust, 2- or 3-spoke wheels, the DS's single spoke could flex or even break under impact forces during a crash. And because the steering column itself was not collapsible in early models, it could act as a solid spear aimed directly at the driver's chest. Combine this with minimal dashboard padding, and the DS's cabin, for all its space-age beauty, was alarmingly unforgiving in collisions. Owners often describe the DS as a car that seemed to hover more than drive, but it required devotion and care. The hydraulic system needed regular maintenance and precise fluid levels, and failures were expensive and complex to repair. Early models were notorious for stranding their owners with hydraulic collapses or electrical gremlins. Mechanics unfamiliar with its eccentric design often couldn't fix it properly. Yet those who loved it accepted its flaws because no other car in the world drove like a DS. It cornered smoothly, floated over rough roads, and could travel at high speeds with a composure that seemed decades ahead of its time. The DS was also a symbol of national pride in France. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement of technological ambition. Politicians rode in them, movie stars adored them, and when Charles de Gaulle famously survived an assassination attempt in one in 1962, the DS kept moving on 3 tires thanks to its hydropneumatic system. It cemented its place in history as a miracle machine. But while it became legendary for that episode, the average DS owner didn't have a bodyguard convoy and bulletproof glass. A crash in a DS for ordinary people could end very differently. In crash safety terms, the DS belonged firmly to the pre-safety era. Its slender A-pillars, fragile roof, minimal reinforcement, and complex but failure-prone systems meant that what felt like magic on the road could turn into a nightmare in an accident. Modern crash tests conducted with vintage DS models highlight how badly they fare in collisions compared to even basic modern vehicles. Passengers in a frontal crash would face severe intrusion from the steering column and dashboard, while a rollover would offer little protection from crushing forces. And yet, despite all this, the DS remains one of the most beloved and influential cars ever made. It inspired generations of designers and engineers. Its aerodynamic body was unlike anything else in its day. Its suspension system eventually found echoes in luxury cars decades later. Its blend of elegance, radical innovation, and delicate fragility gives it a mythical aura in automotive history. The Citroën DS was built to dazzle, not to protect. It embodied a moment in automotive history when engineering genius reached for the future without fully understanding the consequences for safety. To this day, when people see one glide silently down a road, they don't think of its brittle roof or fragile steering column. They think of a goddess floating past them, serene and beautiful. But beneath that magic, the DS was as dangerous as it was revolutionary, a perfect example of how innovation without safety can create both legends and nightmares. When the world first laid eyes on Jaguar XK120 at the 1948 Earl's Court Motor Show, it was as if the post-war automotive landscape had suddenly leapt 20 years into the future. Most cars of the time were upright, boxy, and rather unremarkable in performance, relics of pre-war designs still hanging on in an austere Europe. And then came the XK120, a long, low, impossibly elegant sculpture on wheels. Its flowing curves, swept fenders, and impossibly long bonnet gave it an almost supernatural presence, as though it had rolled straight out of a dream of speed. But this machine was not merely a beauty. It was, by the standards of its day, astonishingly fast. It could reach 120 miles per hour when most family cars struggled to manage 65. This made it quite literally the fastest production car in the world. It promised freedom, power, and sophistication, But it also carried with it something far more dangerous, a hidden fragility that would claim more than a few lives. Under the hood of the XK120 was a technological jewel, a 3.4-liter DOHC inline-six engine, a design that would become the foundation of Jaguar's racing triumphs in the years to come. Smooth, powerful, and eager to rev, it gave the car effortless speed and a thrilling soundtrack. This engine was capable of propelling the XK120 well past 120 miles per hour in its early lightweight aluminum-bodied form, speeds that only specialized racing cars had touched before. It made owners feel invincible, but what they didn't realize at first was that the rest of the car was nowhere near as advanced as that magnificent engine. The brakes were the most notorious flaw. Jaguar equipped the XK120 with drum brakes, a system already outdated by the late 1940s. At moderate speeds, they functioned acceptably, but push the car even a little, and things changed quickly. Drum brakes generate enormous heat under repeated use, and when overheated, they fade catastrophically. On a spirited drive or during a race, they could lose most of their stopping power within minutes. One racing driver of the era recalled, "You could feel the pedal getting softer lap after lap. By the fourth or fifth time you came to the end of the straight, it was like pressing on a wet sponge." Another owner admitted that on a long Alpine descent, the brake pedal went nearly to the floor, and he had to rely on downshifting to avoid disaster. Imagine traveling at speeds well over 100 miles per hour with brakes that could vanish like smoke. It turned what should have been a thrilling drive into a deadly gamble. The XK120's bodywork, though breathtaking to look at, was equally treacherous in an accident. Jaguar's early production models used lightweight aluminum panels to save weight and achieve those record-breaking speeds. Aluminum bends easily. It also tears easily. In a high-speed crash, the XK120 offered almost no structural protection. There was no reinforced frame around the passenger compartment, no real crumple zone, no steel cage. The windshield would shatter like glass, and the body would fold like a discarded sheet of metal. Many early owners who survived serious crashes described how the front end disintegrated upon impact. Some racing photographs from the early 1950s show XK120s torn nearly in half after accidents that in a modern car might have been survivable. Adding to the danger was the complete lack of basic safety features. This was a time before seat belts were standard or even commonly installed. Drivers sat behind a thin steering wheel and a beautiful but entirely unprotected dashboard. The steering column pointed directly at the driver's chest like a spear. In a frontal impact, it often didn't just bend, it impaled. Many fatal accidents involved drivers being thrown forward into or through the windshield. The XK120 was a machine that expected you to respect its speed. It gave no second chances if you didn't. And then there was the handling. At a glance, the XK120 appeared to be a racing machine, but beneath its sensual lines was a solid rear axle and primitive suspension design, far from the sophistication its body promised. At moderate speeds, it handled well enough, but when pushed near its limits, the rear end had a nasty habit of breaking loose without warning. On wet British roads, and there were plenty of those, that sudden oversteer could turn a joyful drive into a violent spin in an instant. The narrow bias-ply tires of the era offered little grip, and combined with the immense torque of the straight six, the XK120 could easily step out of line, leaving even experienced drivers struggling to regain control. The stories from owners and racers became part of the car's legend. One American enthusiast in the early 1950s remembered racing his XK120 against other sports cars of the era. He said, "It would leap forward like a lion. You'd pass everything on the straight. But when it came time to slow down, you prayed. Every corner felt like the car was asking you if you had made your peace with God." Another survivor of a wreck on a rain-slicked highway said simply, "I wasn't driving a car. I was riding a bullet with bad brakes." In spite of all of this, or perhaps because of it, the XK120's reputation only grew. It wasn't a machine for the cautious. It was a machine for dreamers, thrill-seekers, and those willing to dance on the edge of control. Hollywood stars like Clark Gable and racing drivers from Europe to America flocked to it. Its danger became part of its allure. Driving it fast was like defying gravity, intoxicating but unforgiving. The XK120 also became a cornerstone of Jaguar's motorsport ambitions. It proved itself on racing circuits around the world, laying the groundwork for the legendary C-Type and D-Type racers that would go on to dominate Le Mans. But even in racing, the XK120's limitations were clear. Its brakes were a constant problem, forcing drivers to nurse the car carefully. Mechanics learned to pack wet rags around the brake drums to help cool them between sessions. Still, for all its flaws, it was a symbol of speed and beauty in a gray, recovering post-war world. Looking back today, the XK120 stands as both a milestone and a warning. It was the first of a new generation of fast, glamorous post-war sports cars, a machine that gave ordinary people access to extraordinary speed. But it also represented the dangers of an era before safety engineering caught up with performance. It was fast, fragile, and merciless, a masterpiece that could turn into a death trap in the blink of an eye. It is remembered now with reverence and a touch of fear. Those who drove one at its limits speak of the thrill and the terror in the same breath. It was beautiful, it was brilliant, but it was also brutally unforgiving. The XK120 didn't just set speed records, it taught the world what happens when power runs ahead of safety. When the Ford Fairlane first rolled out in the mid-1950s, it embodied everything Americans thought a car should be in that optimistic, chrome-drenched era. It was long, wide, and powerful-looking, wrapped in gleaming steel and mountains of shiny trim. It had the presence of a luxury liner on wheels, floating down the highway with that effortless V8 burble that defined post-war American motoring. To the average family man of the time, owning a Fairlane wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was a symbol of status, progress, and the American dream. But beneath that glamorous exterior was a machine that, by modern standards, was a silent killer. The Fairlane was built in an age before safety was even a serious consideration in automotive design, and what that meant in practice was terrifying. The Fairlane was a heavy car, tipping the scales at over 3,500 pounds depending on configuration. This immense weight was both its charm and its curse. Drivers felt like they were piloting something substantial, a real machine of steel, not plastic. But once that mass started moving, stopping it was another matter entirely. The braking systems of the time were woefully inadequate. The Fairlane used drum brakes on all four wheels, and those brakes, when asked to stop all that weight, often overheated and faded dramatically. In an era when highways were becoming faster and cities more crowded, this created deadly situations. Drivers would press the brake pedal in panic, only to feel it go soft and unresponsive as the drums boiled away their stopping power. Rear-end collisions were common, and when a car that heavy hit something, the consequences were brutal. The handling didn't help either. The Fairlane had a soft suspension designed for a smooth, floating ride, not for control. The car swayed and leaned dramatically in corners, and its steering was heavy, slow, and imprecise. Drivers often described it as steering a couch, and they weren't exaggerating. The combination of massive weight, vague steering, and weak brakes made the Fairlane feel more like piloting a boat on wheels than driving a modern automobile. On a winding road or in an emergency maneuver, it simply didn't react quickly enough. Many owners of the time accepted this as normal because every big American car behaved similarly. But in hindsight, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Inside the Fairlane, things were even worse in the event of a crash. Modern cars are filled with crumple zones, airbags, energy-absorbing steering columns, and padded dashboards. The Fairlane had none of that. Its interior was made almost entirely of steel and hard plastic. The dashboard was a slab of metal, designed for looks rather than protection. The steering wheel was also steel, with a rigid column pointing directly at the driver's chest like a spear. In a frontal collision, that column often didn't crumple or bend. It drove straight into the driver, causing catastrophic injuries. There were no seat belts to restrain passengers, which meant that even in a low-speed impact, occupants could be thrown into the dashboard, the windshield, or out of the car entirely. Crash safety in the 1950s was almost non-existent. Automakers, including Ford Motor Company, sold cars on beauty, power, and comfort, not safety. Seat belts were optional, and almost nobody ordered them. There were no padded dashboards, no energy-absorbing structures, and no headrests. Even the glass was unforgiving. Safety glass was still in its early forms, and windshields could shatter into dangerous shards. One crash report from 1958 describes a driver who survived a Fairlane collision but was left permanently disfigured after being thrown through the windshield. Another survivor remembered how a minor collision at only 30 miles per hour sent him into the metal dashboard, breaking his jaw and several teeth. These were not freak accidents. They were routine outcomes in an era when the car was built like a tank but protected its occupants like a tin can. The cultural attitude of the time made things worse. Driving was marketed as glamorous, and the Fairlane itself was often shown in advertisements gliding effortlessly down smooth highways with smiling families inside, free of worry. There was no discussion about safety features, because to most buyers, those ideas were foreign. The average American car owner in 1956 didn't think about seatbelts. They thought about chrome, V8s, and the open road. That lack of awareness, combined with a vehicle so heavy and unyielding, created the perfect storm for tragedy on the highways. And yet, there's an irony in how much people loved their Fairlanes. Many owners fondly remember the sound of the engine, the way the car seemed to float down the road, and how solid everything felt. It felt like nothing could touch it, recalled one former owner decades later. You felt safe because it was big. What I didn't realize was that if something happened, all that steel would work against me. Another man who crashed his Fairlane in 1961 said, "The car barely had a dent. I was the one who broke." The Fairlane was also emblematic of a transitional time in automotive history. The interstate highway system was being built. People were driving faster than ever before, and the cars were getting bigger and heavier to match the post-war boom. But safety technology lagged far behind. The Fairlane was fast for its time, capable of cruising at 80 miles per hour with ease, but it was utterly unprepared to protect its passengers at those speeds. In fact, its very construction made high-speed crashes even more lethal. Today, the Fairlane is remembered as a beautiful classic, a piece of 1950s Americana. At car shows, people admire its sweeping chrome trim, its elegant fins, its grand proportions. But behind that nostalgic beauty lies a dark truth. It was one of many cars from an era when style mattered far more than safety. Driving a Fairlane fast in its day was an act of faith. If anything went wrong, a tire blowout, a sudden stop, a collision, the odds of survival were grim. It was a machine that could make you feel invincible until the moment reality struck with the force of solid steel. It stands now as a monument to both the beauty and the danger of mid-century American motoring. The Fairlane was powerful and elegant, but also unforgiving and deadly. It reminds us that the golden age of cars was also an age when danger rode quietly alongside every mile. The Fiat 500 Nuova, introduced in 1957, is one of the most beloved icons of European automotive history. A car so small, cheerful, and practical that it became the symbol of post-war Italian ingenuity. Its rounded, compact body could fit anywhere, from narrow cobblestone streets in Rome to crowded Parisian avenues, making it a true city car before that term even existed. Its charm was irresistible. Tiny wheels, a simple two-door layout, a cheerful engine note, and a personality larger than its 3.3-foot width. It represented freedom for a new generation of urban Italians, offering independence and mobility for people who could not afford larger, more luxurious cars. But beneath its whimsical exterior lay a stark, almost terrifying reality. The Fiat 500 was a tin can on wheels. Weighing barely over 1,200 pounds, the Nuova 500's lightweight construction was its strength for efficiency and maneuverability, but a fatal weakness in anything resembling a serious collision. Its chassis was thin, its body panels nearly paper-thin, and the interior offered essentially no structural protection. There were no crumple zones, no reinforced cabin, and no safety features beyond perhaps a horn and windshield wipers. Steering was direct but light, and the narrow wheel track meant that at higher speeds the car could become unstable, particularly on uneven or wet roads. Collisions with larger vehicles or even moderately sized trucks almost always left the 500 crushed, leaving occupants exposed to catastrophic injury. The Fiat 500's safety shortcomings were compounded by the era's general lack of automotive regulations. Seat belts were not standard, airbags didn't exist, and the idea of energy-absorbing steering columns was still decades away. Even a relatively minor frontal crash could turn deadly, with the engine bay collapsing backward into the passenger compartment. Rear impacts offered no better protection. The tiny rear crumple zone and minimal metal meant that occupants were thrown violently, often through thin rear panels or the hatch. Owners frequently described the sensation of being inside a matchbox during accidents, where the small size and featherweight construction that made city driving so easy could just as quickly amplify danger. Despite these dangers, the Fiat 500 Nuova thrived in Europe largely because urban driving was slow, streets were narrow, and the car's diminutive size made accidents slightly less frequent, though by no means safer. Its tiny engine, usually a 479cc or 509cc two-cylinder, produced just enough power for city commuting, and top speeds were modest by modern standards. But those modest speeds didn't guarantee safety. In crashes against larger Italian sedans or commercial vehicles, the 500's feeble frame offered almost no resistance. Many contemporary reports from the late 1950s and early 1960s highlight fatalities in collisions that would have been survivable in larger, sturdier cars. Interestingly, the Fiat 500 Nuova's design was almost internally dictated by necessity and economy. Italy's post-war roads were narrow, fuel was scarce, and urban density demanded tiny cars. Engineers prioritized lightweight materials and compact size over occupant protection because it was simply impossible to meet both goals within a price the public could afford. What emerged was a car that was brilliant in engineering, revolutionary in design, and absurdly unsafe by any modern standard. Its thin metal, minimal suspension, and tiny tires contributed to an exhilarating sense of nimbleness in traffic, but all of it came at the cost of survivability. The interior reflected this minimalist philosophy. Bench seats were basic, dashboards were simple metal panels with a few knobs and gauges, and controls were rudimentary. There were no padded surfaces, no reinforced doors, and certainly no airbags. In a collision, the interior provided no defense. Even a gentle bump could send occupants lurching against unforgiving metal. Owners often remarked that the car's small size felt cozy, until it wasn't. Yet the Fiat 500 Nuova's legacy is more than its dangers. It transformed urban mobility, democratized car ownership in Europe, and inspired generations of city car design around the world. Its influence is still felt in tiny cars today, from the modern Fiat 500 to countless other microcars across Europe and Asia. And while it may have been dangerously unsafe, it offered something that few other cars did at the time: absolute accessibility, cheerful design, and a sense of independence. In retrospect, the Fiat 500 Nuova was both a triumph and a warning. It showed how far design, economy, and innovation could take a car, and how fragile that innovation could be when safety was an afterthought. Owners loved it for practicality and charm, but driving one at speed or in a collision was to engage in a tense dance with physics itself. It remains a symbol of post-war ingenuity, Italian style, and the raw, unprotected vulnerability of early microcars. The Volkswagen Beetle, particularly the models produced between 1950 and 1969, occupies a unique place in automotive history. Universally recognizable for its rounded, friendly silhouette and cheerful personality, it became one of the most beloved and ubiquitous vehicles in the world. From the streets of Berlin and Paris to the highways of America, the Beetle was everywhere. Its popularity was not accidental. It was cheap to buy, easy to maintain, mechanically simple, and remarkably durable. Its air-cooled, rear-mounted flat-4 engine could run in extreme climates and keep going when many contemporaries would have broken down. Yet, despite this mechanical brilliance, the Beetle carried with it a shadow that few drivers fully appreciated at the time. It was fundamentally unsafe, and in many circumstances, it could be deadly. The rear engine configuration, while innovative and practical for compactness, introduced handling quirks that could become dangerous at higher speeds. With most of the car's weight over the rear axle, the Beetle had a pronounced tendency to oversteer, particularly during sudden lane changes or evasive maneuvers. Drivers unaccustomed to this behavior could quickly find themselves spinning out of control, sometimes rolling the car or crashing into obstacles. Combined with its small wheelbase and narrow track, the Beetle was prone to instability, especially on highways or curving mountain roads. Its rear engine layout also meant that, in a frontal impact, there was little mass or structure to absorb the force before it reached a cabin, making collisions extraordinarily hazardous for the occupants. Structurally, the Beetle was exceptionally lightweight, which contributed to its efficiency and ease of manufacturing, but also made it extremely vulnerable in accidents. The body panels were thin, the floor and firewall offered minimal reinforcement, and the interior provided almost no protection. Frontal collisions often resulted in the fuel tank, mounted under the front hood, rupturing and causing fires. The car's thin metal crumpled readily, transmitting crash forces directly to the passengers. The steering column, a rigid shaft, could impale the driver in certain types of collisions, and the doors were prone to bending or even detaching in side impacts. Seat belts were not standard for much of this era, and airbags were decades away, leaving occupants entirely at the mercy of the vehicle's fragile shell. Despite these dangers, the Beetle became a cultural icon and was adored around the world. Its approachable design, cheerful lines, and friendly face inspired affection in owners and passers-by alike. People trusted the car mechanically. It would start in freezing temperatures, endure punishing roads, and require minimal maintenance. Its simplicity meant that repairs could often be performed by the owner with basic tools, which contributed to its legendary reputation for reliability. Its affordability democratized car ownership, especially in post-war Europe, allowing a new generation of drivers to experience personal mobility. Families, students, and workers flocked to the Beetle, drawn by its charm, practicality, and ease of use. Yet, for all its virtues, the Volkswagen Beetle's design was a study in contradictions. It excelled at protecting the car itself, keeping the engine running, resisting corrosion, and lasting decades, but it did little to protect the humans inside. Its thin steel body, rudimentary chassis, and exposed components meant that the very features that made it light, nimble, and cheap also made it deadly. In highway collisions, particularly with larger vehicles, passengers could be thrown violently, impaled, or burned. Its small size compounded the problem. In an accident, there was little distance between the occupants and any external forces, leaving almost no room for energy to dissipate. In many ways, the Beetle was the ultimate mechanical survivor, but the survival of its passengers was left entirely to chance. Over time, awareness of the Beetle's risks grew. Emerging safety regulations in Europe and the United States began to highlight the inadequacies of its design. Vehicles with reinforced frames, crumple zones, and safety equipment increasingly outclassed the Beetle in terms of occupant protection. But the car's enduring popularity, affordability, and cultural significance ensured that it remained on the roads for decades, often driven by people who cherished its reliability and charm, but underestimated the dangers inherent in its structure. Even as drivers learned to respect its handling quirks and fragile body, accidents claimed lives, a grim reminder of how automotive engineering once prioritized economy and simplicity over human survival. In retrospect, the Volkswagen Beetle of the 1950s and 1960s is both a triumph and a cautionary tale. It represents the ingenuity and efficiency of post-war automotive design, delivering mobility, affordability, and charm to millions. Yet it also serves as a reminder of the era's disregard for crash safety and occupant protection. While mechanically nearly indestructible, it could be lethally fragile in a collision, and countless owners experienced firsthand the consequences of its lightweight construction and rear-engine instability. Its legacy is therefore double-edged, celebrated as one of the most iconic and enduring cars in history, yet also notorious for the hidden dangers it carried, illustrating the stark contrast between mechanical durability and human vulnerability in early automotive design. The Studebaker Golden Hawk, manufactured between 1956 and 1958, is one of those rare cars that embodies the audacity, ambition, and contradictions of 1950s American automotive culture. At a time when most American cars were content to be large, comfortable, and moderately fast, the Golden Hawk dared to break the mold. With its jet-age styling, swept-back tail fins, and long, elegant hood, it looked like a car built for the future. The chrome accents glinted like spacecraft trim, and the aggressive grille hinted at the fury waiting under the hood. But its appearance, stunning as it was, only told half the story. Beneath the sculpted sheet metal lurked a machine both exhilarating and perilous. Under that long hood, Studebaker fitted a supercharged 289 cubic inch V8, producing enough power to make the Golden Hawk one of the fastest American production cars of its era. With its short rear deck and substantial engine output, it could easily outrun contemporary European sports cars, something unimaginable for a relatively large heavy coupe of the 1950s. Acceleration was brutal and immediate, floored the throttle, and the car lunged forward with a force that could unsettle even experienced drivers. It was a thrill ride, pure adrenaline packaged in a luxury American coupe, and for the lucky few who could master it, the Golden Hawk offered a driving experience that combined the raw excitement of racing with the comfort of a grand touring car. Road testers of the time remarked on its uncanny ability to launch like a rocket from a standstill, making any standard family sedan look sluggish in comparison. Yet for all its virtues, the Golden Hawk's engineering had glaring weaknesses that made it dangerous in ways that modern drivers might struggle to imagine. The car's brakes were antiquated drum units, barely up to the task of controlling a machine that could reach highway speeds well above the legal limits of the day. Combined with narrow tires and a rear-biased weight distribution, stopping the car quickly was not just difficult, it could be treacherous. High-speed cornering magnified these flaws. The combination of a heavy engine, short rear overhang, and soft suspension meant oversteer was a constant threat. Drivers who approached the car with enthusiasm often discovered that its spectacular performance came with an unforgiving learning curve. Many contemporaneous reviews warned that the Golden Hawk was not for timid or inexperienced drivers, a polite way of saying that a minor miscalculation could lead to a serious accident. The interior of the Golden Hawk, by contrast, was a sanctuary of mid-century luxury. Leather seating, carefully crafted instrumentation, and thoughtfully arranged controls gave the driver a sense of control, but it was largely illusory. Safety, as it was with most cars of the era, was an afterthought. The rigid steel structure of the body transferred crash forces directly to the cabin. Steering columns were non-collapsible, and any frontal collision carried a high risk of impalement or chest trauma. Side impacts were equally dangerous, as the doors and thin side panels offered little resistance to intrusion. Seatbelts were optional, and most early adopters ignored them entirely, caught up in the thrill of the drive. In essence, the Golden Hawk's design treated speed as an adventure sport, with mechanical reliability and styling prioritized over occupant survival. Accidents often ended with catastrophic results, a reality that made the car owning both exhilarating and terrifying. Driving the Golden Hawk was an act of courage. Owners and enthusiasts from the period recall the visceral sense of power, the instant responsiveness of the supercharged V8, and the car's unmistakable presence on the road. But they also speak of the constant tension, the need to respect the limits of braking, cornering, and weight transfer. In many ways, the car rewarded skill, but punished recklessness immediately and without mercy. It was a vehicle that demanded attention, experience, and a healthy respect for physics, an intoxicating mix that defined 1950s high-performance American driving. Despite, or perhaps because of these dangers, the Golden Hawk became a symbol of a particular era of automotive ambition. Studebaker, a company already struggling against the Big Three, showcased in this car that it could compete with the best in terms of performance, style, and technological daring. Yet the car's extreme design also highlighted Studebaker's limitations. The engineering was ambitious, but execution was imperfect. The thrill came at a cost of control. The dream of supercharged dominance collided with the reality of 1950s automotive safety standards. Only a few thousand Golden Hawks were ever built, and each one became a legend, not just for speed or looks, but for the sense of danger and daring it carried every time the throttle was pressed. Today, the Studebaker Golden Hawk is remembered as one of the most exhilarating, beautiful, and perilously exciting cars of the 1950s. It embodies the optimism, ambition, and sometimes reckless spirit of American automotive design in the post-war era. Collectors cherish it for its rarity, its audacious styling, and the raw thrill of its performance. But those who own or drive one also carry an unspoken respect for the car's lethal potential. In the end, the Golden Hawk is more than a car. It is a testament to an era when speed and style were king, when automotive design flirted with danger, and when the line between exhilaration and disaster was dangerously thin. A machine that could make hearts race and, in less careful hands, almost end them. The Peugeot 403, which rolled off production lines between 1955 and 1966, occupies a unique place in automotive history, representing both the pinnacle of mid-century French refinement and the stark realities of an era when elegance and safety were often worlds apart. At first glance, the 403 exuded understated sophistication. Clean lines, subtle chrome accents, and a graceful silhouette that managed to appear simultaneously modern and timeless. Its design spoke to the aspirations of post-war Europe, a continent eager to rebuild, modernize, and enjoy the fruits of mobility without excessive flashiness. Professionals, families, and even politicians favored it for its quiet charm, sensible dimensions, and practical versatility. It could carry 4 to 5 passengers comfortably, navigate narrow city streets, and travel the winding country roads of rural France with grace and stability. Mechanically, the 403 was straightforward yet durable. Its 4-cylinder engine, while modest in output, delivered reliability, efficiency, and ease of maintenance, making it a favorite for those who valued a dependable vehicle over speed or flashiness. Its suspension, tuned for comfort rather than sportiness, provided a smooth ride on the rough, often uneven roads of the 1950s, further cementing its reputation as a trustworthy companion for daily life. However, beneath the poised exterior, the Peugeot 403 concealed dangers that were typical of its time but shocking by today's standards. Like many cars of the 1950s and early 1960s, the 403 prioritized structural integrity and longevity over occupant protection. Its rigid steel frame, while excellent for durability, acted almost like a vice in a collision. Forces from impacts were transmitted directly to passengers rather than being absorbed or dissipated. The steering column, solid and unpadded, presented a particularly lethal hazard in frontal crashes, capable of impaling drivers upon impact. Dashboards were made entirely of metal with sharp edges, and the cabin offered virtually no energy absorption. Doors, while sturdy, lacked reinforced side structures, leaving occupants dangerously exposed during side impacts. Seatbelts were optional at best, and many owners either ignored or did not install them, trusting instead in the car's perceived solidity. Even at moderate speeds, a collision could turn tragic, turning a vehicle celebrated for its elegance into a cage of steel that did little to protect the people inside. The dangers of the 403 were compounded by the fact that it encouraged confidence in drivers who might have overestimated its capabilities. Its nimble handling and compact size made it feel responsive, capable of darting through Parisian boulevards or slipping along country roads with ease. This confidence, however, could be fatal. At higher speeds or during sudden maneuvers, the car's lightweight body could contribute to instability, while the lack of crumple zones meant that the kinetic energy of a collision was delivered directly to passengers. Accounts from the era describe incidents where relatively minor crashes, a slight misjudgment at an intersection, or a tap from another vehicle resulted in catastrophic injury. For all its refinement, the 403 was unforgiving in an accident, a reminder that elegance and reliability did not necessarily equate to safety. Yet the Peugeot 403 achieved remarkable cultural and commercial success despite these risks. Its appearance in European cinema and television helped cement its image as the quintessential French family car. Its practicality, longevity, and affordability made it accessible to a wide cross-section of society, while its understated style appealed to those who sought sophistication without ostentation. Owners prized it for its smooth performance, simplicity of maintenance, and mechanical durability, often reporting tens or even hundreds of thousands of kilometers of trouble-free operation. The car's reputation for reliability contrasted sharply with the hidden perils lurking in its design, a dichotomy that would later fuel discussions around automotive safety reform in Europe. Regulatory awareness and design philosophy began to shift in the 1960s and 1970s, influenced in part by the limitations of vehicles like the 403, emphasizing occupant protection, energy-absorbing structures, and safety-oriented innovation. Today, surviving Peugeot 403s are celebrated as classic cars, prized for their elegance, mechanical simplicity, and historical significance. Restorers and collectors admire the car for its timeless design, enduring engine, and the sense of connection to a bygone era of automotive culture. Yet each restored example carries with it a silent reminder of the perils of its original design: the exposed steering shaft, rigid steel body, and lack of modern safety measures. Driving a 403, especially one restored to original specifications, is a lesson in balance. Respect the car's capabilities, understand its limitations, and appreciate the remarkable combination of style and engineering that made it a star in its time. It remains a symbol of mid-20th century French ingenuity and elegance, a car that was reliable, graceful, and culturally significant, yet simultaneously a cautionary tale about the high cost of aesthetics and practicality in an age when automotive safety was only beginning to be understood. The Peugeot 403 exemplifies an era when cars could charm, endure, and carry entire families across a continent, all while offering almost no real protection against the forces of a collision, making it a car both beloved and dangerously fragile, a true icon of its time. The Toyota Crown RS20, produced between 1955 and 1962, is one of the most significant vehicles in the history of Japanese automotive engineering, representing a bold and ambitious leap for a nation still recovering from the devastation of World War II. At a time when Japan's domestic car market was dominated by small, utilitarian vehicles, the Crown RS20 was Toyota's audacious statement that the country could produce a full-sized, refined, and luxurious sedan capable of competing not only with domestic rivals, but also with Western imports. Its styling was restrained yet dignified, reflecting a subtle sense of prestige. Chrome trim was applied sparingly, body lines were elegant without excess, and the interior aimed to balance comfort with functionality. The cabin offered room for 4 to 5 passengers, with seating and finishes that, for the time, suggested a serious step toward the sophistication that would later define Toyota's premium line. The RS20's inline-6 engine was a marvel of simplicity and durability, smooth in operation, and engineered to withstand the rigorous conditions of Japan's still-developing road network. Paired with a sturdy yet uncomplicated suspension setup, the car provided a level of ride quality and drivability that felt modern, capable, and reliable. It was a vehicle that conveyed status, signaling that Japan was no longer content to produce only basic, economical transportation. Yet beneath this veneer of refinement and progress, the Crown RS20 was dangerously underbuilt, a reflection of the era's technological limits and the priorities of a nascent luxury segment in Japan. The vehicle's thin steel frame and minimal reinforcements prioritized weight savings and cost-effectiveness over occupant safety. In frontal collisions, the cabin could collapse with alarming ease, transmitting almost the entire force of impact to passengers. Side impacts were similarly unforgiving, with little to no protection from intrusions, leaving occupants highly vulnerable. The steering column, unpadded and weak, could collapse or pierce the driver in the event of a crash, a tragic characteristic common to cars of this era, but particularly acute in a sedan aspiring to be a luxury model. Braking systems, while adequate under normal conditions, were prone to fade under stress, especially during emergency maneuvers or prolonged downhill braking. Rollover protection was non-existent, and the car's relatively tall, narrow stance increased the likelihood of tipping in sudden turns or evasive maneuvers. While these dangers might seem extreme by modern standards, at the time they were often overlooked or simply accepted as part of motoring life. Still, for a luxury sedan, these shortcomings were particularly ironic. The very car meant to convey security, elegance, and composure in the hands of its driver could, in an accident, offer almost no protection, turning a minor collision into a potentially fatal encounter. The RS20's hazards were exacerbated by the image Toyota cultivated for it. This was Japan's first true luxury sedan, meant to instill confidence in its occupants. The car's refinement, smooth power delivery, and solid handling encouraged drivers to push it beyond the limits its design could safely endure. On winding rural roads or emerging urban streets, the Crown could be unforgiving. Small miscalculations, a sudden swerve, a poorly timed overtaking maneuver, or an unexpected obstacle could quickly become catastrophic. Despite this, the car's reliability and mechanical resilience were highly praised. Engines, transmissions, and basic chassis components could endure years of rigorous use, often far longer than many Western luxury sedans of the same era. For many Japanese professionals, government officials, and emerging business leaders, the RS20 became both a status symbol and a workhorse, reflecting their aspirations and trust in Toyota as a brand capable of producing vehicles that balanced performance, luxury, and dependability. Culturally, the RS20 occupies a fascinating space in Japan's post-war recovery narrative. It symbolized progress, ambition, and national pride, a tangible demonstration that Japanese automakers could craft vehicles that were not merely functional, but elegant, comfortable, and aspirational. It helped lay the foundation for Toyota's future dominance in the luxury and executive car market, eventually leading to the creation of the Crown line as a long-running and highly respected series. Yet, alongside its successes, the RS20 also stands as a cautionary tale. The car's structural weaknesses, minimal crash protection, and rudimentary safety features remind modern observers that the evolution of automotive luxury in Japan was inextricable from the parallel need for improved safety. Lessons learned from the RS20 influenced subsequent Toyota designs, pushing engineers toward stronger chassis, better braking systems, and more comprehensive occupant protection, all while maintaining the comfort and refinement expected in a high-end sedan. Today, surviving examples of the Toyota Crown RS20 are treasured by collectors, automotive historians, and enthusiasts of classic Japanese vehicles. They are admired for their historical significance, understated elegance, and mechanical simplicity, often evoking nostalgia for an era when Japanese engineering was emerging on the global stage. Yet every time one of these vehicles is driven, restored, or displayed, it carries with it the silent warning of its era. A car that represented progress, reliability, and luxury, but also embodied the dangers of an era before automotive safety standards were widely understood or enforced. The RS20 is thus a car of striking contrasts, a symbol of ambition, refinement, and engineering achievement, and simultaneously a reminder that even the most elegant and technologically advanced vehicles of their time could still be profoundly hazardous. It remains a crucial milestone in Toyota's history, illustrating both how far Japanese automotive design had come by the mid-20th century and how the pursuit of luxury and sophistication could be tragically undermined by the era's nascent safety awareness. In the end, the Toyota Crown RS20 stands as a testament to innovation, ambition, and the harsh realities of mid-century motoring. A car that opened the door to Japan's modern luxury automotive identity, even as it left its occupants perilously exposed to the unforgiving physics of the road. The Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, produced from 1954 to 1957, occupies a rare and almost mythical place in automotive history. Simultaneously hailed as one of the most beautiful cars ever made and feared for its startlingly unforgiving nature. Its story begins with the W194 race car, Mercedes' answer to European endurance racing, from which the 300 SL inherited its revolutionary tubular space-frame chassis. This chassis was lightweight yet exceptionally rigid, providing structural integrity unmatched in most production vehicles of the era. However, this same rigidity, while ideal for speed and handling, created a dangerous downside. In a collision, the frame transmitted nearly all impact forces directly to the cabin and its occupants. Unlike modern vehicles, which feature crumple zones and engineered energy-absorbing structures, the 300 SL left nothing to protect the driver and passenger from the raw physics of a crash. Perhaps the most iconic feature of the 300 SL, its Gullwing doors, arose directly from this innovative chassis design. The high-silled tubular frame construction made conventional side-hinged doors impossible. Mercedes engineers solved the problem with the dramatic upward opening doors, which instantly became the car's signature. However, these doors, though visually stunning, introduced a terrifying hazard. In the event of a rollover, particularly a sideways or roof-first flip, the doors often could not be opened, leaving occupants trapped in a collapsing or burning vehicle. Stories from early owners and racing enthusiasts recount harrowing escapes where help arrived only just in time, underscoring the tension between the car's beauty and its inherent danger. The car's performance was revolutionary for the 1950s. Its 3-liter inline-six engine, featuring direct fuel injection, a first for production cars, produced an unprecedented 215 horsepower in a chassis that weighed just over 3,000 pounds. The 300 SL could reach speeds exceeding 160 miles per hour, a remarkable feat in an era when most roads were narrow, unpaved, and poorly maintained by modern standards. With such capability, the car required a skilled hand. Any misjudgment, abrupt maneuver, or overzealous cornering could easily result in a catastrophic accident. Compounding the danger were the primitive tires of the period, often bias ply with limited grip, and drum brakes that could fade under repeated heavy use. Even the car's advanced suspension, designed for agile handling and stability at speed, could not compensate for inexperienced drivers pushing the Gullwing beyond safe limits. Safety risks were not limited to high-speed operation. The 300 SL's chassis design and engine placement created an unusual weight distribution, favoring the rear, which could lead to sudden oversteer if handled improperly. At slower speeds, the tubular frame left virtually no margin for absorbing minor collisions, and its steel dashboard and rudimentary steering column were hazards in themselves. The seating was low and the cabin confined, which, combined with the car's structure and the inability to quickly exit through the doors in a rollover, made even modest accidents potentially fatal. Accounts from the 1950s suggest that, while owners reveled in its precision, a fraction of them were often hospitalized in early mishaps, illustrating that the car's technological brilliance coexisted with a very real physical danger. Culturally, the 300 SL Gullwing became a symbol of aspiration, daring, and luxury. Hollywood stars, industrial magnates, and racing icons clamored to acquire one. Its appearance in magazines, advertisements, and films established it as the archetype of the exotic sports car, elegant, fast, and unattainable for all but the wealthiest. Yet this cultural pedestal only deepened the danger, as many of its high-profile owners were enthusiasts rather than professional drivers, prone to testing the limits of its performance on public roads. The car demanded respect. Those who understood it survived, and those who underestimated it could face life-threatening consequences. The juxtaposition of its breathtaking design, cutting-edge technology, and perilous handling created a paradox that has fascinated automotive historians for decades. Mechanically, the 300SL was extraordinary. Its inline-six engine, a direct descendant of Mercedes' racing program, was smooth, powerful, and resilient, while its fuel injection system allowed a level of throttle precision previously unseen in production cars. The lightweight aluminum bodywork, coupled with the tubular chassis, yielded an unparalleled power-to-weight ratio. Yet all of this performance excellence came at the cost of safety. The car's very architecture, designed to maximize speed and handling, left no margin for error. The 300SL was capable of sublime performance in the hands of a skilled driver, but required constant vigilance and discipline to avoid disaster. Today, surviving 300SL Gullwings are among the most coveted collector cars in the world, commanding millions at auction. Enthusiasts celebrate its revolutionary engineering, timeless design, and racing pedigree. But among collectors, there is always an acknowledgement of its lethal potential. Driving one is not just an exercise in enjoyment, it is a test of skill, attention, and respect for the car's raw power. The Gullwing's legend is inseparable from its dangers, making it one of the rare instances where automotive beauty and extreme risk coexist in perfect, terrifying harmony. It stands as a testament to Mercedes-Benz's ingenuity, a car that pushed the boundaries of technology, design, and performance, while simultaneously serving as a chilling reminder that innovation without safety can turn even the most desirable automobile into a deadly trap. In essence, the Mercedes-Benz 300SL Gullwing is the ultimate paradox, a car of breathtaking artistry and revolutionary engineering that could exhilarate and terrify in equal measure. Its fame is built not just on its looks or speed, but on the aura of danger it carried. A sleek, rolling masterpiece capable of killing as easily as it could inspire awe. The Gullwing didn't just define an era, it defined the delicate, sometimes deadly balance between ambition, performance, and human vulnerability in mid-20th century motoring, making it, arguably, the most beautiful death trap ever created.